Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the Rural Violent Crime Reduction Initiative June 2024 Rural Roundtable. Today's topic of focus is evidence management and retention. Many of you know me, but for those that don't, my name is Samantha Reinierson, and I'm a senior program manager at the National Policing Institute. John's counterpart at LISC for the Rural Violent Crime Reduction Initiative, and I'm joined today by John and Juliana Palmer, who is our BJA policy advisor. Before we dive into today's Rural Roundtable, a couple of event logistics just for folks. One, as you heard, we are being recorded today, so this will be distributed for future access to folks and posted on the RVCRI website. We'll make sure to send out an email notice once the recording is available. Everyone has been muted upon entry just to keep that background noise down, but you will be able to come off of mute during the Q&A and interactive discussion session. As is usual with federal events, there is a feedback survey after today's Rural Roundtable. It should only take you about 5 minutes to complete, and we do appreciate any feedback that you give us. It helps us improve for future events. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we will have the facilitated discussion portion of today's roundtable. So if you have questions along the way, feel free to either put it in the chat or there is a Q&A feature. For some folks, it's right in the bottom bar already. For others, it's going to be under that more setting. In the end, if you would like to come off of mute and talk through some of your questions, please use the raise hand feature. That way we can just call on folks so that folks aren't talking over one another. So looking at today's agenda, we will have a presentation from our guest speaker, Ken Clary. He is the chief in Bellevue, Nebraska, and also serves as an SME for the Rural Violent Crime Reduction Initiative. And then we will have grantee presentations from both the Kent, New York Police Department and the Webster County, Iowa Sheriff's Office, and then open it up for this facilitated portion. So before I turn it over to Ken and let him dive in, I just want to briefly introduce him. So as I said earlier, Ken is the chief in Bellevue, Nebraska. As chief there, he oversees a department of approximately 118 sworn officers. And prior to his time in Bellevue, Ken worked for the Iowa State Patrol, where he served in a variety of roles, including district commander, statewide tactical commander, assistant operations commander, Professional Standards Bureau, and as the CALIA Accreditation Coordinator. He holds a master's in public administration from Upper Iowa University and was selected by the National Institute of Justice as a lead scholar. He graduated from the FBI National Academy, the FBI Law Enforcement Executive Development Symposium, and completed the International Association of Chiefs of Police Leadership and Police Organizations course, as well as Northwestern University's School of Police Staff and Command. In addition to that, he's worked on several national programs and initiatives, including working with the International Association of Directors of Law Enforcement Standards and Training and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration on updating the data-driven approaches to crime and traffic safety, or DDACS, as some of you all may know it as. While also working with us here on the RVCRI at the National Policing Institute, he's also helped develop and stand up another one of our programs, the National Law Enforcement Roadway Safety Program, and works with the NYU Policing Project on the 30 by 30 initiative. He works as an executive fellow for us and was inducted into the Center for Evidence-Based Policing Hall of Fame in 2019 and has received the IACP J. Standard Baker Lifetime Achievement Award. So Ken, I'll now turn it over to you. The floor is yours. You're muted, Ken.
All right. I'll start off by apologizing for everybody having to sit through that introduction. But as she stated, Ken Clary with Bellevue Police Department had the opportunity, as Sam mentioned, to work as a CLIA coordinator and have quite a bit of experience overseeing evidence management and retention. So put this together so that you could have some things to think about as you're looking at your evidence management within your agencies, but also at the end, this is a 30,000-foot view of evidence management. We'll talk about, Sam will get into sample policy repository that NPI is putting together, which will give you some sample policies that you can draw from and obviously we'd be happy to help you by answering any questions that you have now or into the future. So the first slide talks about evidence management retentions, which we'll be discussing. It's just the proper collection and preservation of property and evidence. In other words, the items that are entered into your possession of law enforcement agency. It includes basically anything that comes into your custody, whether it be through evidence or turned over properties. So it includes possession and custody, storage, documentation, inspection, and release of those items. The key is the uninterrupted control of those things that you can show integrity of all of the materials that come into your custody. So considerations for policy language, you need to start by defining the difference between evidence, what your officers are bringing in through their law enforcement actions, and property that's non-evidentiary, and draw a clear distinction between the two, because handling of each is going to be different as well. That would include retention periods, records management, and destruction of each. So beyond that, you also need to consider things that should not be accepted into your evidence room. Items like food, leaking materials, things like that, things that might be hazardous. So as we look at storage considerations, there are several items within evidence and that need a higher level of security, if you will. Those things might that are the expectation is higher are high value items, things like cash, jewelry, items like that. Dangerous items as well, knives, guns, any types of weaponry like that, and then narcotics as well, all types of narcotics. Each of these need an extra level of security, and the detail should be in the fact that not only is it in a secure location and then a locked evidence room within that, but it needs to an extra level of security and be locked down even within that locked evidence room. So also to consider when you're looking at your storage is the unique storage. Obviously, vehicles from homicides, things like that. So large vehicle storage, what's that look like other than a garage? And then temperature control for perishables. You'll see in the photo here on this slide, that's an evidence refrigerator that we have on site. So obviously a lot to consider with the special considerations. Additional considerations for storage, moving on to the next slide. Temporary security for drop-offs. Obviously, we're 24, most all of us are 24/7 operations. So when your property evidence is closed, where are your officers going to bring your items to? So looking at temporary storage lockers, so that they can gain access, leave it in, and then leave so that no one else has access to it. Because a couple of things that are red flags, officers should never leave evidence in their vehicles. They should also never store it in their own offices or in desks or anything like that. It's just a non-starter. So packaging considerations, a number of things to consider with that. One of the items that you'll see a clear bag here. Not everything can be put in a clear plastic bag. However, the storage should be in something that is able to easily verify what is in there without having to open it up or breach the seal, if you will. You also need to consider detailed labeling instructions so that everything needed regarding that case is in one location, including attaching a report and chain of custody paperwork. And then obviously there are special considerations for storage as well, including liquids, powders, sharps, other things like that. Marijuana, I know, especially if you're cutting a large grow, can mold and become hazardous if it's not stored properly. So need to consider all of those things. Other considerations, you should have forms for removal. Oftentimes we have to remove items even for short periods of time, possibly to send narcotics to a lab to be weighed and tested, but also they may be checked out for court purposes. And then eventually, depending on whether it's evidence or just property, it has to be disposed of or released to someone. So you need different forms for each of those types of transitions or transfers, if you will. And again, coming back to something I mentioned earlier, you need to develop timelines for retention for these things. Obviously, at the end of the adjudication for the conviction or, beyond that appeals, how long do you keep the evidence after the adjudication of the entire trial? And then plans for things like unclaimed property that's found, that you go through all of the processes and you end up with, what are you going to do with those things? Are you going to donate? Are you going to destroy? And then how to deal with those things as well. Digital evidence we actually recommend a policy for digital evidence on its own, because it's such a large portion of what we deal with today. This would include all of your in-car cameras, your body-worn cameras, photos taken at the scene, anything like that. It could also include Ring doorbell footage, things like that are turned over to you as well. It should, like other pieces of evidence, it should include the handling, storage, release, destruction of these items as well. And then in the photo here, you'll see a drop box for cell phones. If a cell phone is seized from a suspect, it's placed in this locker so that you can't remotely access it and wipe the phone, which is something that can be done today. So it's a storage a locker that does not allow for remote access to phones. So another thing to think about. I know we're going fairly quickly, but we're going to pause here to take a real quick poll for those in the audience. Do you currently complete inspections, audits of your property and evidence room? Simple yes, no, or doesn't apply. Obviously, if you don't have an evidence room, you cannot inspect it. So we'll give you just a couple minutes here or a couple seconds here to answer that. Let me know, Sam, when we can move to the answers there.
We'll give folks about 5 more seconds for those who haven't responded to get their answers in. And then Reggie, if you want to end it, it looks like Ken, almost half say yes, they do have an inspection audit process. One says no, and then the others are not applicable or unsure what their policy is.
Very good. Well, I will tell you, according to most accreditations, it is a requirement to have these inspections. And there are different times that you can do that. If we move on to the next slide. These inspections and audits are meant to ensure the integrity and control of all property and evidence. You need to, when you're looking at these audits, you need to consider your timelines for audit frequency. Generally speaking, a couple audits a year, one announced, one unannounced. You can utilize outside personnel to complete these audits as well, a partnering agency. A full audit is generally done anytime that you're going to turn over custody of the evidence room to another custodian, or adding someone to ensure that everything is on the up and up prior to that occurring. It's also imperative that more than one person be involved when you're doing these audits, again, to ensure the integrity of that. So moving on to other considerations, obviously firearms, besides being in an additional locked container, as we talked about earlier, some thought should be given to fingerprinting and possibly collecting DNA off of them. We also test fire every weapon that comes in to get a fingerprint, if you will, to put in the NIBIN system. And then, and obviously NIBIN stands for National Integrated Ballistics Information Network, for case traces that could be utilized in the future for that weapon, or look at that weapon for past crimes. So those are things you'll want to consider when entering firearms into your property and evidence. There are also state-specific things that you may need to be aware of. We can't speak to that in, times 50. But if you aren't aware of any state-specific considerations, I would recommend getting with your state patrol, your state police. They should have a subject matter expert in the field that can assist you with what those things might be. As I mentioned earlier, NPI is currently working on a repository of sample policies. And I think Sam had a few things to say about that as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ken. Yes, as Ken mentioned, we are working on a sample policy repository and guidance document. So twofold there in terms of what you're going to see. One is going to be guidance documents. Those would be 1 to 2 page documents on topic areas, evidence management and retention being one of those. And it's going to give you guidance on things that you should consider placing into the policy, as well as items that may come along with the policy, right? So this may be things like training elements. This may be things like involving the community in the policy review. It could be those things that come along with a policy development. One thing I want to be kind of clear about is those guidance documents will not tell you one way or the other that you have to address something. It will simply say that it's best practice to include language on that. So the example that I normally give is around body-worn cameras. Right, we will never say when it comes to citizen notification of recording that you should tell a citizen you're recording or you should not. However, what those guidance documents would say is you should have language in your policy around citizen notification. So that's part 1 of that repository. Part 2, as Ken mentioned, is going to be sample policies that are in line with those promising and best practices that are identified. So we're hoping that will launch later this summer. It will be available on the Rural VCRI website that everyone has access to. And it will be publicly available for everyone. So those of you in the program obviously get advance notice that it's coming out, that we're working on it. Some of you have been involved in that process. But it will be available to any agency who's interested in it. Our 2 topic areas that we are starting with are evidence management and retention and digital forensic extraction softwares, 2 things that we're talking about today. So it's great timing. But if once we get there and we're calling for sample policies for those that would like to have their policies in there for others to access as an example, if you're interested in that, just let us know, and we can put you in there as a sample agency.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw out, exiting this presentation, if anybody has any specific questions that they don't get answered today, feel free to reach out to me. We'll help provide as much guidance as possible.
Perfect. Thanks, Ken. Awesome. Well, with that, I'm going to turn it over to our grantee presenters. Before I do, just a little bit about them for folks. So with us today, we have Lieutenant Alex Vanderhoot of the Kent, New York Police Department. So as part of their RVCRI program, Kent has deployed a variety of technologies to gather more intelligence and also more evidence, right, in that case. And so they participate in a regional real-time crime center, as well as deployed automated license plate readers, or ALPRs. And they also upgraded their evidence management system, which he's going to talk about very heavily today. And then following Alex, we have Webster County, Iowa. So we have Sheriff Luke Fleener, Detective Alex Winiger, and Jeanette and Julie from the Safe Communities coordinators that work with the Sheriff's Office at the Fort Dodge Community Foundation. And Webster County has purchased digital forensic extraction software, so really tying into that digital evidence management piece, as well as working on kind of community ties and engagement. So with that, I'm going to put our questions up on the screen that our grantees will be talking to today, and I'm going to turn it over to Alex from the Kent, New York Police Department. So Alex, the floor is yours.
Hey, good afternoon. So get right into it. My agency and my community. We are a rural community, Putnam County, New York. Most people have never heard of it. We're about an hour north of New York City, just kind of give you an idea where we are in New York. We have about 13,000 residents. Our town is, we split our town basically into two sections for the purpose of patrol. We have two zones. Our eastern section, Lake Carmel, is really the more populated area. And then we have the western area, Kent, larger plots of land, takes a little longer to get to most of the spots there. Our police department, right now we have 19 sworn. That's from the chief down to the lowest patrol. We do have one open spot right now that we're trying to fill. And we have 5 civilian dispatchers that we provide 24/7, 365 coverage to the town. So prompted us to apply for the RVCRI. So after I sat in on a information session for the grant, it basically fit perfect to our agency. Smaller agency, a lot of times we're overlooked on, most grants. We either have to be a certain size or, it's very, very competitive. Putnam County's got no major cities, no cities at all. We're one of the few counties in the state that does not have a city. So it makes it a little more difficult to obtain funding for stuff. This is a perfect opportunity for us to obtain equipment, software, training that, our residents would not necessarily have to fund and we would not be able to afford typically. So also gave us the opportunity to have our guys participate in a real-time crime center, Westchester County, which is directly to the south of us. They had started the RTC a couple of years ago, and it kind of went over into Putnam. It's now the Westchester Putnam RTC, and so this gave us the ability to send our guys. We have 2 guys that go down. One was one of our detectives. The other one is a patrol officer. They do every other Monday. So one Monday the detective will go, the following Monday the officer will go. So it gives us some integration there and allows us to participate. So summarize your RVCRI program and work accomplished to date. One of the first things we did is we added to our LPR systems. So we were able to add another fixed LPR that brought us up to 4 in our town. We added another mobile LPR as well. To give you an idea, the LPRs that we've used have been just incredible. I'll talk about that in a couple minutes, but within the first 3 days of us putting our first one up, we developed a suspect in a burglary case. So he had driven right through, we got a description of the vehicle, and we were able to nail down a suspect. He was a lifetime criminal. He was wanted in 3 states at that point for burglary cases, so worked out pretty well. So we were able to send a couple of our officers through some pretty valuable training through the grant. Like when we talked today, we were able to put in place our new evidence software. So that was huge for us. Our LPR systems are linked in through the Westchester Putnam RTC. So I think they have close to 300 sites now between Westchester, Putnam. They're tied in with New York City. They have agencies in New Jersey, Connecticut. So it's pretty far spread and pretty big intelligence network now. So to date, that our LPR systems alone, just in the town of Kent, they provided intelligence to the RTC. They provided leads on major cases, located missing persons, and led to the arrest of several subjects, including a shooting suspect from NYPD. He hit our LPRs, I think, 3 days in a row. We ended up setting up a kind of a net with the sheriff's department, and we got him on the 4th day driving right through, and he was taken into custody and turned over to the NYPD. So it's been huge for our department, very, very beneficial, not only for us, but a lot of surrounding agencies, especially to Westchester. As far as our evidence system, we were working on a very outdated system. We were pen and paper. It was, we would make an arrest, we'd bring evidence in. Evidence forms would be filled out pen and paper. It's kind of sloppy. My handwriting is horrific, so I took to typing it. It still was not a very professional presentation, especially something goes to court on a major case. It didn't look the best. So basically, it would get taken into a temporary storage. Our evidence techs would bring it in, again, pen and paper. As far as evidence transfer, it was taken out of temporary storage, went to a permanent spot, and it was recorded. And then, a year later, when something went to trial, they'd be sorting through boxes of evidence on a shelf to try and find a bag of cocaine that had been seized or something along those lines. So it was not a very efficient way to go about it. When we had to, I kind of talked about audits before. These audits took forever. Long time. We had 2-3 supervisors, detectives working on audits, and it would be just wildly inefficient. It took a long time. So we implemented a company called Tracker Products. Completely different way of going about things now. The guys have taken to it really well. Basically, if somebody makes an arrest or we collect a piece of evidence in a case, it is logged into a cloud-based evidence server. They can print a label directly from the cloud-based service, prints out, goes on the front of a sheet. We have a nice professional evidence sheet that prints out not only for our arrest folder, but for the evidence text to bring in, goes into temporary storage. And then when the evidence texts come in, they have a scanner. They scan it. They then scan the location on the shelves where it's going to for permanent storage, and it is kept there. When it's got to be moved, brought to the lab, brought to a trial or a hearing, they can bring it right up on the cloud service. They know, all right, it's on shelf 5. They go to shelf 5. They have the barcode, and they can scan it in and out. So we have, the chain of custody is continuing there. Our officers really needed little to no training on the program. We did everything in-house. The evidence techs kind of just spent a little bit of time with the guys, went over basic policy, and we've had very, very few issues. Guys took to it very quickly. And when we send our paperwork over to the DA's office now, it's in a nice professional presentation, and they can actually read it, which is good. I think our biggest issue with the evidence system was getting all the backlog stuff. It's very easy to do stuff as they come in. We're not a huge agency. We don't have a ton of evidence coming in at a clip usually. The problem is we have 45 or 50 years worth of back evidence sitting in. So that's been the biggest challenge for our detective and our sergeant who's in charge of evidence, is they have to go backwards. So they've been eating through it. They're doing a good job with it, but we still have some work to do there. But it's been really, really good for us. The DA's office is super happy because things are easier to track. Like I said, there is a nice, easy chain of custody, and they're getting that nice professional presentation with the evidence sheet. So sustainability, we have a very supportive town board. They're very good to us. They understand, the needs to kind of move forward with the times. And we have gone through and approved everything beforehand with them. Like when we go looking for grants or looking for funding, we have a conversation with them first. Hey, we're looking to do this. There's going to be some sustainability needs there. And I feel like that communication up front means a lot because they know it's coming. They know we're trying to do things better and get the money for the town without, putting an expense on our taxpayers. But they also know in their head now, all right, next year we're going to have an added expense in the budget for, the software license. So that's, we've been in touch with them. They know the LPRs those have become a yearly thing and a monthly thing actually too, because each fixed site LPR has a Cradle Point router attached to it with a Verizon connection. So each one of those sites has a $40 per month bill that comes with it. And then it's also got a recurring software license, which is, I want to say, $380 per camera. Most of our sites have 2 cameras. We have one site that's got 3. Actually, 2 sites that have 3. So each one of those sites is, close to $1,000 a year, plus the Verizon connection. So we did have a conversation with our town accountant, our town board. We expressed the importance of these items to them. They understand, they're supporting us, and it's been added to our budget. And as far as the real-time crime center, we're going to continue. We move our staffing around when we need to. We pay some overtime when we need to. It's one of those things. It's become like a force multiplier for us, and we're getting a beneficial relationship out of it. We're providing a lot of information to them. They are helping us out with certain things. If we don't have access to certain, facial recognition software, we can call them. If we need an analyst to go through, 5 tower dumps for cell phones for a week, we send the stuff down to them, and they take care of us. They help us out. So it's really been, it's a give and take, but it's definitely very beneficial for us, and we definitely plan on continuing that. That's all I got.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, I will turn it over to Webster County and Sheriff. I believe you're kicking us off there. So I'll turn it to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I will talk about the Sheriff's Office a little bit, and I'll turn it over to Julie and Jeanette. They can talk about the Fort Dodge Community Foundation and describe some of the things they do. Webster County is located in northwest Iowa, where our population is roughly 36,000. Our Sheriff's Office has 21 sworn. Our local police department has 40. So in scope of metro areas, we're relatively rural. And our biggest issues in the last 5 years has been an increase in violent crime, primarily due to the increase in the presence of illegal narcotics, whether it's opioids or methamphetamine. So we spend most of our time doing drug enforcement type things. We do have a large number of shootings and violent type crimes. So that kind of led into what that next question is. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. So I'll turn it over to Jeanette and Julie. They can talk about the foundation.
Yeah, so like Luke said, we're a part of the Fort Dodge Community Foundation, which Fort Dodge is the county seat for Webster County. And we serve as a catalyst for charitable giving, which then in turn goes back into various programs and resources within our community to make it a better place to live and raise kids. Obviously, safety is probably the #1 factor in quality of life. So that's where we come in. And that's why we've gotten active in this. And it's why the Safe Communities Coalition was founded. That started about a year, probably a little less than a year before we landed this grant. And, having gotten the grant, that really solidified our partnership with the law enforcement, with the Sheriff's Department, as well as the police department. So I'll let Julie talk a little bit about what prompted us to apply for the grant.
So as Jeanette said, we are a community foundation, so we spearhead a lot of the projects in Webster County and in the county seat of Fort Dodge. A lot of community partners will come to us and have ideas or have aspirations of doing new projects or new programs in this community. But when they're coming to us, a couple of years ago, we started seeing an increase, especially in youth shootings. And it was starting to fuel into that fear factor of why would we move to Fort Dodge? Why would we move to Webster County when there's beautiful trails, there's beautiful businesses to utilize, but then all of a sudden we're not safe. So how do we address that as a community? So that was where the spearheaded idea came together of the Safe Communities Coalition. We knew it wasn't just fair to say it's the police department, it's the sheriff's office, they should be doing all the work. What can we do to help them? So we got a lot of community partners together around the table and started talking about how that coalition could help. I mean, that was instrumental when Sheriff Fleener came in, and I'll let him talk about kind of what was spearheading that, but what can we do to help the Sheriff's Office address some of these issues?
Statistically, in the last 3 years, when they studied the 26 largest cities in the state of Iowa, 5 years ago, we were barely in the top 10, and now we're in the top 5. So we realized from the law enforcement perspective, just by call volume, that there was something that we needed to do, and reaching out to our community partners and figuring a way to connect with the young individuals that have been involved in the spike in crime with firearms and illegal narcotics. This conversation was we were having those conversations when the opportunity arose to apply for this grant, and we thought about programs like Neighborhood Watch, other town hall meetings where we could bring community people together, along with our cyber crime unit, which we have based here in Webster County, that is a large part of our investigative tools. When the chief earlier talked about digital evidence, that is a huge element in our criminal investigations. And the licensing for our Gray Key system is expensive and hard for us to find that money in our budget when it continues to be an important tool that we need, along with all the other substantial factors that we budget for. So that, I think collectively together, that prompted us to go ahead and submit the application, and we were lucky enough to be selected.
Yeah, so some of the things that we do from the foundation side is take the information that law enforcement wants to get out to the community. Initially, that's why we started Neighborhood Watches with Neighborhood Watches, hoping that that would serve as kind of a direct line of communication to the citizens of Webster County. So we had initially started that, and that has kind of rolled into now we do town halls with law enforcement so that they can get information out. We've done, we go into the schools, and we do programs within the schools to talk to parents about issues. Each time we go into a school with what we call a parent cafe, we talk to each principal and say, you know, what are the issues that you're seeing within school that are affecting your kids' safety? Sometimes it is, you know, like Luke had said, the internet is such a huge issue right now. And a lot of the narcotic sales and things like that are stemming from social media use and phones. So we've worked a lot with internet safety and getting that information out to parents. And yeah, so that's been one of our big focuses. And right now we've also worked on bringing various speakers to Fort Dodge. We did a speaker from the organization Protect Young Eyes. We brought him to Fort Dodge when we first started. And then we also have done presentations on the human trafficking in Iowa. So that's been a big thing. Part of the challenge that we have with some of the work is getting the community buy-in. So, you know, when we talk about Neighborhood Watches, that's been fairly slow. It kind of gets people out of their comfort zone. They don't like to necessarily reach out and get that going. So we really, you know, one of the successes kind of rolls right into that. It's our partnerships with various partners, and we're able to kind of throw around ideas and, you know, work around that and try to find different lines of communication and ways of getting out this information to the public. So yeah, those were some of our biggest challenges with this. But Luke, if you want to talk a little bit about Reiki more and what you're doing with this.
Yeah, a portion of our grant pays for our Gray Key licensing that allows our investigators to get into phones that are locked and people won't provide passcodes. So with me today is Detective Alan Wininger. He spearheads that cyber crime unit. He can give you statistically some of the numbers they go through and the importance of why we need this technology in today's world of digital evidence. I'll turn it over to him.
Hello, I'm Alex Wininger. I'm one of the investigators at the Sheriff's Office. I've been in the cyber unit for, I believe it's 5 years now. We use a couple different forensic tools. We've been using Cellbrite in our unit for, I think, 15 years. We're starting to realize some issues with, with technology now, all the applications that are out there, the Snapchats, the Instagrams, Facebook, you know, Telegram, Signal, WhatsApp. We realized that Cellbrite wasn't getting a lot of this stuff in these extractions, and obviously a lot of the criminals aren't always cooperative with us, you know, giving passcodes up, things like that. So we were able to use the Gray Key tool at a different agency, and we're able to see the power of it. And we know now, since we've had it, the successes, we're getting into applications where they're deleting data and putting people at crime scenes with location data and history. And our unit probably does 350 to 400 phones a year. And there's two of us, one detective from the police department, myself, and I would say 90% of crimes anymore have a phone tied to it in some way, shape or another. Whether it's putting them at the scene of the crime, the phone was used to document the crime, or harassment online, stuff like that. So yeah, the Gray Key's been great for us. We've been able to get a lot of successful investigations out of it, especially some of our homicides. And it helped develop more leads. Who are these people talking to in these applications? Because nowadays no one calls or texts. It's all based, they're all Snapchat messaging. They're all they're Facebook calling or messenger calling. So yeah, we knew we were leaving a lot of evidence behind. So this was obviously a perfect opportunity for us to start getting that stuff and building these cases further, and actually, putting some of these complex cases together, especially when you have multiple people involved with our narcotics guys and, these violent crimes and things like that. So.
Challenge-wise, so far we've been successful. Jeanette touched a little bit about the community buy-in, the community participation. I think in all the meetings that I've had with other grant recipients, that seems to be a common theme, that we all start with great intentions, that we have these programs that we think will be successful. Participation is key, and then we struggle at getting the people to find time in their busy schedules to come and sit down or participate or attend the town hall meetings, whatever that may be. I think the key to our success is to continue to push on the trail that we are now, and eventually we will get more involvement. I don't know any other ways to do that. You can't reinvent the wheel. You can't continue to get new programs. What we're doing is making a difference. It's just small, and it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Jeanette and Julie, anything on that?
Yeah, and I think that kind of rolls us into like the sustainability piece too. One of the key aspects we looked at when we were initially applying was this coalition effort. We know the sheriff's office is extremely busy. They're out there doing the day-to-day work. So how can we help get more people involved and bring back that awareness piece? So one of the other pieces of our grant was a media campaign as well. So that has just launched. We're a year into the cycle right now. So we're kind of getting all of the pre-planning stuff done and the organizational part of it together. And now our local paper, the Messenger, Fort Dodge Messenger, has ran it. They are helping us run a piece a week. So there is a piece in the actual physical paper. They can go to the online media too. They'll get it through their digital ads that redirects them. We were able to launch a new website that has a ton of information on it. So it's really just trying to bring that awareness piece back to the greater community and saying, okay, this isn't just their problem. This is our problem. And if you see something, say something. That is the big push that we're working on as a coalition. And so not just from the educational standpoint of the parents and the kids, here's what you need to be watching for, here's what you need to report, but also for the business community too. We had the fortune of, at the community foundation, we work with a lot of different businesses that may not always have that interaction with the sheriff's department. But if we can bring this awareness to them and say, here's what we actually are trying. A lot of times it's easier to say, well, it's their problem, or here's the problem, but I'm just going to complain about it and not do anything. Well, if it's a problem, like contribute to it. So help us fundraise this program. So the sustainability piece, I think, is really bringing more people to the table. So it's going to be ongoing because they've seen the direct results that it's having on this community and how it can actually help to have that Gray Key software right in our back pocket. It's right here in Webster County.
Our sustainability plan is very simple. We're going to continue to push these programs, the community town halls, a neighborhood watch program. Our recent conversations have ventured into diversion programs for our youth that are getting in trouble at the school and then removed from the public school settings and put into an alternative school. And those are usually a high percentage of our troublesome youth. And we've talked about ways that we can intersect and maybe put a gap in between those two steps to get them back into a normal school so they're busy all day and actively participating in school functions. I think that will be something that we will look at moving forward. I like the idea of the license plate readers in future grant applications. That may be something we can pursue. It sounds like that is a great tool to deter and or help solve crimes. We don't have any of those in our community right now. We have a lot of cameras in our community, but no license plate readers. With the success that I've heard today, I think that would be something that we could look at as a future grant opportunity for us to be successful in reducing crime in Webster County and in Fort Dodge. Julie and Jeanette, sustainability things.
Yeah, so I think that, you know, one of the best parts about being able to sustain what we do is seen within our partnerships. You know, like those conversations are always evolving around what else can we do? Where can we bring new people in? Where are the various ways that we can get information out? So being able to have those conversations with our community partners has brought a lot to the table and has really opened up a lot of doors. So
yeah, we just keep spreading that message and just keep reinforcing it. I think kind of goes back to that repetition phase of just so long as we keep putting it in front of people and in front of our community that this is not going away, we have to keep working on it. That's going to help the donations come in on the back end of it to make it sustainable.
Great. Well, thank you all. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so that we can see everyone in the room. So we'll open it back up so that we're not spotlighting, so that everybody's visible. We'll do our family of squares, as I like to call it, but really opening it up now for the facilitated discussion portion of today's roundtable. So again, you can get to us in a couple of ways if you'd like to ask a question or have a comment. One is you can put it into the chat or the Q&A feature, again, that you see down there on the bottom of your screen. Chat should be out. Q&A may be under your more option, or it could be in your bottom bar, but please feel free to use either of those. Or if you would like to be a brave soul who comes off of mute and says something, we do just ask that you use the raise hand feature or flag us in some way. That way we can call on folks individually so that we don't have to worry about folks kind of talking over one another. That sometimes happens in those virtual environments. So I'll give folks a few minutes to do that. And while folks are chatting, one of the questions that I often get asked, and this may, Webster County, this might come for you all as well, since your focus on your presentation was really on the digital evidence piece, is oftentimes about, well, how do you train somebody on that and how do you keep them, right? Once these folks have these certifications, right? Celebrate and Gray Key trainings are not cheap. So once you have folks trained up on that, how are you retaining those people?
So luckily we're part of what's called the Internet Crimes Against Children's Task Force. So we do receive a lot of training through like federal funding essentially through that. So that's kind of what basically baselined us for a lot of our things. The Iowa DCI in Iowa is like our state police. They kind of head it. So they're allocated so much money a year. And they allow us to kind of get certified and will help pay for some of the recertifications. So that kind of helps out in times like these. But yeah, I mean, some of the trainings are pretty long and things like that. So it's obviously takes time, but yeah, they're pretty good at helping us with that. So
Some of that allocation of funds is due to the fact that we serve not only our local sheriff's office and police department, but the neighboring counties and communities that law enforcement needs assistance with digital evidence. Our investigators will help them. So it's not just our community, it's our general area around us that we service and provide that service. So that's why they help us with that funding to increase the present force multiplier, as you heard before, something that we can use to help out Northwest Iowa, not just where we are.
Thanks. And then just so that folks, I'm sure everyone can see the chat, but I am getting a couple of chats on my side too that are just saying, very impressed with the programs folks have set up, and good job on that work. So those chats are coming through as well. So just wanting to acknowledge those. And then the other piece that I wanted to dive into a little bit more, and Ken, I'll throw this your way first, I think, is related to the inspections and audits. Alex hit on this a little bit too, right? Especially going back historically when they were pen and papering it. So maybe Alex, you can go next. Is kind of what, in your agency, what do you do for inspections or audits? How many times a year are you conducting them? What does that look like?
So we do a lot, but we have 3 full-time evidence techs, as well as a sergeant and a lieutenant who are all assigned to that. So we're doing evidence audits every other month. They're not deep dives, but they're dives just to ensure. But then we go beyond and also do a full audit every year. 100% of everything in our evidence log. You don't need to go that deep, especially, I've been a district commander in Ottumwa and in Osceola, and we had evidence rooms ourselves. And as a lieutenant, I was the evidence manager. You don't have to do that deep of a dive. If you're doing a couple of evidence audits, I would lean on another agency though. Actually, going to Webster County there, Fort Dodge comes in and gives you a body, and you do a check with them, looking over your shoulder, and then, vice versa. You may even, I'm not sure, Sheriff, I don't remember if you guys share an evidence room. But I was actually the area commander in that area. Fort Dodge was one of my district offices. So I have a love for Webster County.
Right.
But,
all right. And then Alex from Kent, I don't know if you want to weigh on a little bit what that looks like in Kent. You mentioned, it was a bit painful in the past with the pen and paper, but.
So we actually just brought it up at our last supervisor meeting that we are going to have to get ready to do an audit again. They haven't been done in a little bit. And I know I'm not super involved with the tracker products, but I know there's basically a way you could set it, whatever percentage of an audit you want to do, and it will self-select. All right, you're going to check on these 20 items, or you could set 5% or 10% or whatever you want to be. So that's probably what we're going to go with, because we're also in the early stages of looking at starting accreditation with the state. So that's one of our moves. We want to get all our ducks in a row for that. So another.
Alex makes a good point. Randomly generated, not, hey, we're going to go check on one that is the very squared away investigator that we know all of his stuff is good to go. Should be randomly generated. And the other piece that I would say should be done every time is, if you get a new evidence custodian, you got to do one before the old one's gone, have them participate in it. But if you check the newspapers, back about 10 years ago in the Mason City district, we had a evidence tech that was doing some things that weren't so proper. Happened to be a sergeant who's no longer with the state patrol. But you can't be too careful when it comes to integrity of your evidence room.
And I would just say I slyly planned that. I have zero knowledge of Iowa geography, but I planned for Ken in Webster County to have this connection. I'm taking credit even though I had no idea.
That's a good thing.
Good. So, all right. And then the one other thing that I've heard come up just a little bit too, especially as we get into the digital forensics, and Ken, you hit on it, right? You almost have like a Faraday cage Dropbox, right? So that like folks can't get access to those devices or those phones once they're in evidence. As that becomes more and more prominent, how is that changing, right? Police departments and even your district attorneys, your county attorneys, whatever they call, when you're transferring that evidence over, talking through that, how is that changing the landscape for you all from a very high level? That's a big question, I know, but from a very high level perspective, how's that changing the game?
I guess I'm a little bit confused on your question. You're talking about protection of those cyber devices.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be cognizant of it from the word go. You got an investigator or a patrol officer out on a stop, and they happen to, grab a couple, pound of meth, and you're going after that phone for the investigation. If you're releasing anyone from that stop, that you need to lock that phone down as soon as you can, because it can be wiped remotely very quickly. So. We go directly back to the office and put it in that box. You can you can also, you can power down, which doesn't always protect, you can remove batteries, things like that. But we actually teach our people to leave the phone on and plug it in, which there are plugs in those boxes. So you're retaining, so you don't have to worry about the encrypted passwords or things like that. I mean, we can get through them. It just takes a lot longer. So keep them powered, keep them plugged in, throw them in that box, and it's protected. I know those boxes are expensive, having just recently purchased more. But if you don't have access to one, a neighboring agency might. It's probably something you could go after in the grant as well. I would suggest that as an option. But regarding county attorneys, we're basically pulling that information off of the phones, out of the technology, off of the computers, whatever, and generally speaking, we'll take still shots of the information they need. We're not giving them the digital file per se, unless it is required for court, something like that, in which case we'll put it on a thumb drive and, transfer those files. But for the most part, it's protected. We've got 3 cyber guys that work on that diligently to download those phones, etc. I'd let anybody else jump in on that one.
Yeah, I'll just add on to what the chief is saying, that a lot of our investigative skills come back to training, knowing that you don't power down the phone, knowing that it needs to be in a safe spot, airplane mode, that all falls upon our investigators, making sure that the patrol guys that are working at midnight, when they have that stop with a pound of methamphetamine, understand this complex evidence that's in that phone and how important it is for us to get that. And if they don't do something right at midnight, it's not going to help us at 7 o'clock the next morning when we get the phone. So I think between educating our people that are out there on the street, and then sometimes you have to educate the prosecuting side that this is what you're looking at. They may not be able to decipher all that information when our investigators turn over a huge file on a thumb drive that has all these accounts on there. Sometimes you have to educate them, and that you go to here to see this, and this app was how they were communicating, where they're going to meet, whatever that is. And it's all about having good communication between all the people involved.
Well, thank you all. Well, I know we're coming right up on time, so I'm going to share my screen again and just do some quick closeout with some upcoming events that we've got and upcoming resources. So my colleague did just put that feedback survey link that I mentioned at the top of the call in the chat. So you can reach that either using that link, or if you prefer to scan the QR code on the screen, you can do it that way. We'll also send it in the follow-up email once the recording is available in the next couple of days. I already did talk about our policy repository that'll hopefully be coming out later this year. Our next webinar is scheduled for July 18th at 2 p.m. Eastern. We will be sending out the invites and information for that next week. But that one is focusing on crime data in rural communities, what's out there, how can we use that, whether it's internally generated data, external data. And there will also be a couple of other BJA programs on that call to talk with you all and others about resources that are out there through BJA specific to crime analysis. Obviously, some of you all have those efforts under this program, and we can continue to support those, but there are additional programs out there as well. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, John, to talk about the next event on September 26th.
Thanks so much, Sam. Very quickly, the next LISC knowledge sharing event will be September 26th, 2 o'clock. We really see this as an opportunity to follow up from the November 2023 knowledge sharing event that we did, which was an introduction to rural community and economic development done by our friends at Rural LISC and our friends from the Tamaqua, Pennsylvania RVCRI site. So really looking at revitalization as a sustainability strategy, and where are those partnerships with those community and economic development partners that can help sustain your crime reduction efforts. So look forward to that, and more information to share as we get closer to the event. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, John. Well, with that, that brings us right to the hour. So just thank everyone for attending and participating today. We really do appreciate it. If you have any questions or would like any follow-up, please let myself or John know. We're happy to share that information and get those questions answered. With that, we will close out. So thanks everyone again.